Sorry for being a little late today, everybody. I know no one's here yet, but for the replay, you can know I was late at starting today. Just waiting for folks to join. Of course, according to the stream chat users in chat, there seems to be a lot of people in the chat right now. I don't believe that, but it sure looks like it. I have a song stuck in my head. I'll let people know that I'm going in case the notification didn't get sent out. Oh, hi. Oh, it's left and right from Charlie Puth with Jungkook of BTS. I don't like it, but it's stuck in my head now. Oh, hi. Contact is bothering me a little bit. Well, it's not really my contact that's bothering me, it's just, my eyes are a little dry, I guess. Sure that the bright lights, or bright light rather, doesn't help, but we do what we have to do. I'm just making sure that my light isn't, like, off the edge of my desk or anything. It's okay. I fixed, the follower notification. The follower notification should now, have a cute little sound associated with it. So now we've got the, what's it called? Now we've got the, donate button all sorted, and the donate notifications all sorted, and we also have, our follower notifications all sorted. Before we had the cute little, image that would pop up when a follower would happen, but now we've got audio as well. Hopefully that's actually taken account. Been taken into account rather. I don't see that came up here, Kayla, so I don't know that it registered. Whoop, whoop. I don't know if my feed cut off there for a second. But yeah, no, thank you. You don't have to do that. I think it, like, knows that you're trying to, I don't know why they would make it so that it wouldn't work if you're trying to test it, but I think that it, like, knows that you're not genuinely, it might be, like, suspecting that you're trying to do some sort of, scamming of Twitch's systems. I don't know. Oh, I see. Skip frames detected. 25% over the last 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. So, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And it probably doesn't look good to the algorithm if people are, like, unfollowing and then follow again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it's a little choppy. I hope that clears up. Let me know how it's going. I may, like, turn off my camera for a second just to try to put, like, some eye drops in. Because dry eyes and screens, they don't go well together. Hold on. I need to have, like, another screen that just has, like, a please hold visual, like a cute little thing. For when I have to turn off my camera for a sec. That would be cute. I don't want to do it on camera. Why do I want to do it on camera? I get all, like, you know, from eye drops. So, no thanks. I just quickly, stealthily turn off my camera for a little bit, and then I will be right back. Hold on. Enjoy just yourselves saying things on screen. Hold on. I don't think it actually worked. Or it fell into my eyelash or something. Ah, there we go. Hold on. Yeah, something like that. Something like that, maybe. We'll figure it out. So hopefully this hasn't completely messed up my makeup, but we'll see. Checked myself out with the camera. Okay. I think we're okay. Yeah, so, if you guys are ready to, we can go ahead and get started with the book. We have, let me just see how much more of the book we have. I think it's enough for two. I do think it's enough for 2 sessions. But, I think within 2 sessions we'll be done. Because it seems to be around 50 pages. 50 pages left, basically. Which usually during each read-through, we read around, I set to read around like 30, but I usually end up reading a bit more. Because it's usually a really good part. So, let's see. Okay. Gonna put in a place for for us to potentially stop, like normal. But yeah, we'll probably end up going past that like we normally do. Okay. Alright, so in my book, we'll be starting at page 237. The chapter is, or section is entitled, A Spiritual Quest for a Deeper Connection with the Universe. And also, me too, I will also miss Nora. Everything looks right with the camera, right? I just want to make sure. I just noticed that the, what's it called? The lines for how wide the camera angle should be over here are a little weird on my screen. But I think we probably look good, right? Flickery? Flickery how? That's not what I saw. Now I'm scared. That's not what I saw. How is it on everybody else's end. Oh no, it's not the color. It was the screen. I don't know how to describe this to you guys. It was like the length of what was going to be shown for the. It's really weird and hard to describe. It's not the color though. That's not what I was talking about. But thank you. Let me. Maybe I can take a. I don't think I can take a screen capture and show it. Changing it to another scene won't help either. Alright, well, whatever. If it's fine, or it seems fine, we can go ahead and continue on. Yeah, so let's go. No, not something lighting-wise. But thank you. Okay. Alright, so... She found the medicine drawer in the kitchen and rummaged through the plasters and ibuprofen and Calpol and multivitamins and runner's knee bandages, but couldn't find any sign of any antidepressants. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was finally the life she was going to stay put in, the life she would choose, the one she would not return to the shelves. I could be happy here. A little later in the shower, she scanned her body for new marks. There were no tattoos, but there was a scar. Not a self-inflicted scar, but a surgical-looking one. A long, delicate, horizontal line below her navel. She had seen a cesarean scar before, and now she stroked her thumb along it, thinking that even if she stayed in this life, she would have always turned up late for it. Ash came back home from dropping Molly off. She hastily dressed so he wouldn't see her naked. They had breakfast together. They sat at their kitchen table and scrolled the day's news and ate sourdough toast and were very much like a living endorsement for marriage. And then Ash went to the hospital and she stayed home to research the row all day. She read her work in progress, which already had an impressive word count of 42,729, and sat eating toast before picking Molly up from school. Molly wanted to go to the park, like normal, to feed the ducks, and so Nora took her, disguising the fact that she was using Google Maps to navigate her way there. Nora pushed her on a swing till her arms ached, slid down slides with her, and crawled behind her through large metallic tunnels. They then threw dry oats into the pond for the ducks, scooped from a box of porridge. Then she sat down with Molly in front of the telly, and then she fed her dinner and read a bedtime story, all before Ash returned home. After Ash came home, a man came to the door and tried to get in, and Nora shut the door in his face. Nora? Nora? Yes? Why were you so weird to Adam? What? I think he was a little bit put out. What do you mean? You acted like he was a stranger. Oh, Nora smiled. Sorry. He's been her neighbor for 3 years. We went camping with him and Hannah in the Lake District. Yes, I know, of course. You looked like you weren't letting him in, like he was an intruder or something. Did I? You shut the door in his face. I shut the door. It wasn't in his face. I mean, yes, his face was there, technically, but I just didn't want him to think he could barge in. He was bringing the hose back. Oh, right. Well, we don't need the hose. Hoses are bad for the planet. Are you okay? Why wouldn't I be? I just worry about you. Generally, though, things turned out pretty good, and every time she wondered if she would wake up back in the library, she didn't. One day after her yoga class, Nora sat on a bench by the River Cam and reread some Thoreau. The day after, she watched Ryan Bailey on daytime TV being interviewed on the set of Last Chance Saloon 2, in which he said he was, quote, on a spiritual quest for a deeper connection with the universe, rather than worrying about, quote, settling down in a romantic context. She received whale photos from Izzy and WhatsApped her to say that she had heard about a horrid car crash in Australia recently and made Izzy promise she would always drive safely. Nora was comforted to know that she had no inclination whatsoever to see what Dan was doing with his life. Instead, she felt very grateful to be with Ash. Or rather, and more precisely, she imagined she was grateful because He was lovely, and there were so many moments of joy and laughter and love. Ash did long shifts, but was easy to be around when he was in, even after days of blood and stress and gallbladders. He was also a bit of a nerd. He always said good morning to elderly people on the street when walking the dog, and sometimes they ignored him. He sang along to the car radio. He generally didn't seem to need sleep, and was always fine doing the Molly night shift, even when he was in surgery the next day. He loved to gross Molly out with facts. A stomach gets a new lining every 4 days. Earwax is a type of sweat. You have creatures called mites living in your eyelashes. And loved to be inappropriate. He, at the duck pond, and the first Saturday, within Molly's earshot, enthusiastically told a random stranger, that male ducks have penises shaped like corkscrews. Okay. An actor? Yeah, I know. It really does make sense. We've never seen that. It makes sense that she wouldn't even think about being one, you know? On nights when he was home early enough to cook, he made a great lentil dal and a pretty good penne arrabbiata. I can only pronounce that like the American non-Italian way, which is kind of funny. Like, because I am Italian. So, arrabbiata. And tended to put a whole bulb of garlic in every meal he created. I would die. That's not in the book. That's me. I would die. But Molly had been absolutely right. His artistic talents didn't extend to musical ability. In fact, when he sang The Sound of Silence, accompanied by his guitar, she found herself guiltily wishing he would take the title literally. He was, in other words, a bit of a dork. A dork who saved lives on a daily basis, but still a dork, which was good. Nora liked dorks, and she felt one herself, and it helped make her get over the fundamental peculiarity of being with a husband you were only just getting to know. This is a good life, Nora would think to herself over and over again. Yes, being a parent was exhausting, but Molly was easy to love, at least in daylight hours. In fact, Nora often preferred it when Molly was home from school because it added a bit of a challenge to what was otherwise a rather frictionless existence. No relationship stress, no work stress, no money stress. It was a lot to be grateful for. There were inevitably shaky moments. She felt the familiar feeling of being in a play for which she didn't know the lines. Is anything wrong? She asked Ash one night. It's just... He looked at her with his kind smile and intense scrutinizing eyes. I don't know. You forgot our anniversary was coming up. You think you haven't seen films you've seen, and vice versa. You forgot you had a bike. You forget where the plates are. You've been wearing my slippers. You get into my side of the bed. Geez, Ash, she said, a little bit too tense. It's like being interrogated by the 3 bears. I just worry. I'm fine. Just, lost in research world. Lost in the woods. The Rosewoods. See, but I would totally get this if I was Ash. First, this is like the worst. In some ways, it's the worst scenario of this, because I feel like a medical professional is like one of the first people that's going to worry about like something like dementia or something like, it would be very concerning. So I don't blame Ash. And also, it's a terrible situation because, again, this is one of the last people that I think you could be open and be like, alright, to tell you the truth, I'm from a different world, and I'm, like, jumping through lives, and this is, like, possibly the one I want to stay in, but, like, I've been to many. And, like, he would be very nervous about some sort of, like, some sort of cognitive problem. And I feel like rightly so. Because part of me was like, why don't you just tell him? Like, be honest with him. But this is, like, the one person who either wouldn't believe or would actually worry, and, like, yeah. Yeah, a lot of the past partners were very inattentive, that's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she felt in those moments that maybe she'd return to the Midnight Library. Sometimes she remembered the words of Mrs. Elm on her first visit there. If you really want to live a life
hard enough, if he really wants to live a life hard enough, you don't have to worry. The moment you decide you want that life, really want it, then everything that exists in your head now, including the Midnight Library, will eventually be a dream. A memory so vague and intangible it will hardly be there at all. Which begged the question, if this was the perfect life, why hadn't she forgotten the library? How long did it take to forget? Occasionally she felt wisps of gentle depression float around her for no real reason, but it wasn't comparable to how terrible she had felt in her root life, or indeed many of her other lives. It was like comparing a bit of a sniffle to pneumonia. When she thought about how bad she had felt that day that she lost her job at string theory, of the despair, of the lonely and desperate yearning to not exist, and this was nowhere near. Every day she went to bed thinking she was going to wake up in this life again because it was, on balance and all things considered, the best she had known. Indeed, she progressed from going to bed casually assuming she'd stay in this life to being scared to fall asleep in case she wouldn't. And yet, night after night, she would fall asleep, and day after day, she would wake up in the same bed, or occasionally on the carpet. But she shared the pain with that pain with Ash, and more often than not, it was a bed as Molly was getting better. It was a bed as Molly was getting better and better at sleeping through. There were awkward moments, of course. Nora never knew the way to anything or where things were in the house, and Ash sometimes wondered out loud if she should see a doctor. And at first, she avoided sex with him, but one night it happened, and afterwards Nora felt guilty about the lie she was living. They lay in the dark for a while, in postcoital silence, but she knew she had to broach the subject, test the water. Ash, she said. What? Do you believe in the theory of parallel universes? She could see his face stretch into a smile. This was the kind of conversation on his wavelength. I think so. Yes, I think so. Me too. I mean, it's science, isn't it? It's not like some geeky physicist just thought, hey, parallel universes are cool, let's make a theory about them. Yeah, he agreed. Science distrusts anything that sounds too cool. Too sci-fi. Scientists are skeptics, as a rule. Yeah, exactly, yet physicists believe in parallel universes. It's just where the science leads, isn't it? Everything in quantum mechanics and string theory all points to there being multiple universes. Many, many universes. Well, what would you say if I said I have visited my other lives and I think I have chosen this one? I would think you were insane, but I'd still like you. Well, I have. I have had many lives. He smiled. Great. Is there one where you kiss me again? There is one where you buried my dead cat. He laughed. That's so cool, Honor. The thing I like about you is that you always make me feel normal. And that was it. She realized that you could be as honest as possible in life, but people only see the truth if it is close enough to their reality. As Thoreau wrote, it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. And Ash only saw the Nora he had fallen in love with and married, and so, in a way, that was the Nora she was becoming. Hold on 1 second, I'm just going to take some water. I was surprised that she went there where he, flirted with her, and she was like, you buried my dead cat once. Alright. Way to, swerve on that, you know? Okay. Alright. We're on to a section called Hammersmith. During half-term, while Molly was off school, and on a Tuesday when Ash wasn't in the hospital, they popped on the train to London to see Nora's brother and Ewan in their flat in Hammersmith. Joe looked well, and his husband looked the same as he had when Nora had seen him on her brother's phone in her Olympic life. Joe and Ewan met at a cross-time Joe and Ewan met at a cross-training class at their local gym. Joe was, in this life, working as a sound engineer, while Ewan, Dr. Ewan Langford to be precise, was a consultant radiologist for the Royal Marsden Hospital, so he and Ash had a lot of hospital-related stuff to moan about together. Joe and Ewan were lovely with Molly, asking her detailed questions about what Panda was up to, and Joe cooked them all a great garlicky pasta and broccoli meal. Ugh!
Garlic is in so much, but I can't. It's not that I don't like it, or that I didn't like it, but I just can't eat it. It makes me unwell, and it sucks because it's in so many things, but I definitely can't eat anything where garlic is part of the staple of the recipe, because, yeah. Yeah. I don't necessarily miss, I miss food, because there's so much food that has it in it. Like, I don't necessarily miss the taste of garlic. I just miss being able to eat things and not having to worry about that. It sucks. I wonder why. I wonder why. And it sucks. Okay. It's Puglian, apparently. It's Puglian, apparently, he told Nora, getting a bit of our heritage in there. Nora thought of her Italian grandfather and wondered what he had felt like when he realized the London Brick Company was actually based in Bedford. Had he been truly disappointed, or had he actually just decided to make the most of it? There was probably a version of their grandfather who went to London and on his first day got run over by a double-decker bus at Piccadilly Circus. Joe and Ewan had a full wine rack in the kitchen, and Nora noticed that one of the bottles was a Californian Syrah from the Buena Vista vineyard. Nora felt, oh, that's really interesting. Nora felt her skin prickle as she saw the two printed signatures at the bottom, Alicia and Eduardo Martinez. She smiled, sensing Eduardo was just as happy in this life. She wondered momentarily who Alicia was and what she was like. At least there were good sunsets there. You okay? Asked Ash as Nora gazed absent-mindedly at the label. Yeah, sure. It just, looks like a good one. That's my absolute fave, said Ewan. Such a bloody good wine. Shall we get it open? Well, said Nora, only if you were going to have a drink anyway. Well, I'm not, said Joe. I've been overdoing it a bit recently. I'm in a little teetotal patch. You know what your bro is like, added Ewan, planting a kiss on Joe's cheek. All or nothing. Oh yeah, I do. Ewan already had the corkscrew in his hand. Had one hell of a day at work, so I'm happy to guzzle the whole lot straight from the bottle if no one will join me. I'm in, said Ash. I'm okay, said Nora, remembering that the last time she had seen him in the business lounge of a hotel, her brother had confessed to being an alcoholic. They gave Molly a picture book, and Nora read it with her on the sofa. The evening progressed. That's always very nice. Like, if you have someone who's struggling with something, even just one person abstaining as well, like, really helps. Because it's so hard if you see everybody else is doing this thing. And, especially, obviously, if you've confessed to already having a problem with something, and then that person's just like, whatever. So it can mean a lot just to be that one person who helps. They gave Molly a picture book, and Nora read it with her on the sofa. The evening progressed. They talked news and music and movies. Joe and Ewan had quite enjoyed Last Chance Saloon. A little while later, and to everyone's surprise, Nora took a left turn out of the safe environs of pop culture and cut to the chase with her brother. Did you ever get pissed off with me? For backing out of the band? That was years ago, sis. Lots of water under the bridge since then. You wanted to be a rock star, though. He still is a rock star, said Ewan, laughing. But he's all mine. I always feel like I let you down, Joe. Well, don't. But I feel like I let you down, too. Because I was such an idiot. I was horrid to you for a little while. These words felt like a tonic she had been waiting years to hear. Don't worry about it, she managed. Before I was with Ewan, I was so dumb about mental health. I thought panic attacks were a big nothing. Mind over matter, man up, sis. But then, when Ewan started having them, I understood how real they were. How real they are.
it wasn't just the panic attacks. It just felt wrong. I don't know. For what it's worth, I think you're happier in this life than the one where you're, she nearly said dead, in the band. Her brother smiled and looked at Ewan. She doubted he believed it, but Nora had to accept that, as she now knew only too well. Some truths were just impossible to see. This next section is called Tricycle. As the weeks went by, Nora began to feel something remarkable start to happen. She began to remember aspects of her life that she had never actually lived. For instance, one day, someone she had never known in her root life, a friend she had apparently known while studying and teaching at the university, phoned her about meeting for lunch. And as the caller, Laura, came up on the phone, a name came to her, Laura Bryan. And she pictured her completely and somehow knew her partner was called Mo, and that they had a baby called Aldous. And then she met her and had all these things confirmed. This sort of deja vu happened increasingly. Yes, of course, there were the occasional slip-ups she made, like forgetting Ash had asthma, which he tried to keep under control via running. How long have you had it? Since I was 7. Oh, yes, of course. I thought you'd said eczema. Nora, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. It's just, I had some wine with Laura at lunch and I feel a bit spaced out. But slowly these slip-ups became less frequent. It was as though each day was a piece fitting into a puzzle, and with each piece added, it became easier to know what the absent pieces were going to look like. Whereas in every other life, she had been continually grasping for clues and feeling like she was acting. In this one, she increasingly found that the more she relaxed into it, the more things came to her. Nora also loved spending time with Molly. The cozy anarchy of her playing in her bedroom, or the delicate bonding that happened at story time, reading the simple magical brilliance of the tiger who came to tea, or hanging out in the garden. "Watch me, Mummy," said Molly as she pedaled away on her tricycle one Saturday morning. "Mummy, look! Are you watching?" "That's very good, Molly. Good pedaling." "Mummy, look! Zoom me!" "Go, Molly!" But then the front wheel of her tricycle slipped off the lawn and down into the flower bed. Molly fell off and knocked her head hard on a small rock. Nora rushed over and picked her up and had a look at her. Molly was clearly hurt, with a scrape on her forehead, the skin grazed and bleeding, but she didn't want to show it even as her chin wobbled. "I'm all right," she said slowly in a voice as fragile as porcelain. "I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm all right." Each "all right" got progressively closer to tears, then horseshoed back around to calm again. For all her nocturnal fears about bears, she had a resilience to her that Nora couldn't help but admire and be inspired by. This little human being had come from her, was in some way a part of her, and if she had hidden strength, then maybe Nora did too. Nora hugged her. "It's all right, baby. My brave girl. It's okay. How does it feel now, darling?" "It's okay. It's like on holiday." "On holiday?" "Yes, Mummy," she said, a little upset Nora couldn't remember. "The slide." "Oh, yes, of course. The slide. Yes. Silly me. Silly Mummy." Nora felt something inside her all at once, a kind of fear, as real as the fear she had felt on the Arctic Skerry, face to face with a polar bear. A fear of what she was feeling. Love. You could eat in the finest restaurants, you could partake in every sensual pleasure, you could sing on stage in Sao Paulo to 20,000 people, you could soak up whole thunderstorms of applause, you could travel to the ends of the earth, you could be followed by millions on the internet, you could win Olympic medals, but this was all meaningless without love. And when she thought of her root life, the fundamental problem with it, the thing that had left her vulnerable really, was the absence of love. Even her brother hadn't wanted her in that life. There had been no one once Foltz had died. She had loved no one, and no one had loved her back. She had been empty. Her life had been empty, walking around, faking some kind of human normality like a sentient mannequin of despair, just the bare bones of getting through. Yet there, right there in that garden in Cambridge, under the dull gray sky, she felt the power of it, the terrifying power of caring deeply and being cared for deeply. Okay, her parents were still dead in this life, but here there was Molly, there was Ash, there was Joe, there was a net of love to break her fall. And yet, she sensed deep down that it would all come to an end soon. She sensed that, for all the perfection here, there was something wrong amidst the rightness. And the thing that was wrong couldn't be fixed because the flaw was the rightness itself. Everything was right, and yet she hadn't earned this. She had joined the movie halfway. She had taken the book from the library, but truthfully she didn't own it. She was watching her life as if from behind a window. She began to feel a fraud. She wanted this to be her life, as in her real life. And it wasn't, and she just wished she could forget that fact. She really did. Mommy, are you crying? No, Molly, no. I'm fine. Mommy's fine. You look like you're crying. Let's just get you cleaned up. Later that same day, Molly pieced together a jigsaw of jungle animals. Nora sat on the sofa stroking Plato as his warm, weighty head rested on her lap. She stared at the ornate chess set that was sitting there on the mahogany chest. A thought rose slowly, and she dismissed it. But then it rose again. As soon as Ash came home, she told him she wanted to see an old friend from Bedford and wouldn't be back for a few hours. The next section is called No Longer Here. As soon as Nora entered Oakleaf Residential Care Home, and before she'd even reached the reception, she saw a frail elderly man wearing glasses whom she recognized. He was having a slightly heated conversation with a nurse who looked exasperated, like a sigh turned into a human. I really would like to go in the garden, the old man said. I'm sorry, but the garden is being used today. I just want to sit on the bench and read the newspaper. Maybe if you'd signed up for the gardening activity session. I don't want a gardening session. I want to call Davak. I want to call Davak. This was all a mistake. Nora had heard her old neighbor talk about his son Davak before, when she had dropped off his medication. Apparently his son had been pushing for him to go to a care home, but Mr. Banerjee had insisted on holding onto his house. Is there no way I can just... He noticed at this point that he was being stared at. Mr. Banerjee? He stared at Nora, confused. Hello? Who are you? I'm Nora. You know, Nora Seed. Then, feeling too flustered to think, she added, I'm your neighbor. On Bancroft Avenue. He shook his head. I think you've made a mistake, dear. I haven't lived there for 3 years, and I'm very sure you were not my neighbor. The nurse tilted her head at Mr. Banerjee as if he was a confused puppy. Maybe you've forgotten. No, said Nora quickly, realizing her mistake. He was right. I was confused. I have memory issues sometimes. I never lived there. It was somewhere else. And someone else. I'm sorry. They resumed their conversation as Nora thought about Mr. Banerjee's front garden full of irises and foxgloves. Can I help you? She turned to look at the receptionist. A mild-mannered, red-haired man with glasses and blotched skin and a gentle Scottish accent. She told him who she was and that she had phoned earlier. He was a little confused at first. And you say you left a message. He hummed a quiet tune as he searched for her email. Yes, but on the phone. I was trying for ages to get through and I couldn't, so I eventually left a message. I emailed as well. Ah, right, I see. Well, I'm sorry about that. Are you here to see a family member? No, Nora explained. I am not family. I'm just someone who used to know her. She'd know me, though. Her name is Mrs. Elm. Nora tried to remember the full name. Sorry, it's Louise Elm. If you told her my name, Nora Seed. She used to be she was a school librarian at Hazeldean. I just thought she might like some company. The man stopped looking at his computer and stared up at Nora with barely suppressed surprise. At first, Nora thought that she had got it wrong, or Dylan had got it wrong that evening at La Cantina, or maybe the Mrs. Elm in that life had experienced a different fate in this life. Though Nora didn't quite know how her own decision to work in an animal shelter would have led to a different outcome for Mrs. Elm in this life. But that made no sense, as in neither life she had been in touch with the librarian since school. What's the matter? Nora asked the receptionist. I'm ever so sorry to tell you this, but Louise Elm is no longer here. Where is she? She died 3 weeks ago. At first, she thought it must be an admin error. Are you sure? Yes. I am afraid I'm very sure. Oh, said Nora. She didn't really know what to say or to feel. She looked down at her tote bag that had sat beside her in the car. A bag containing the chess set she had brought to play a game with her and to keep her company. I'm sorry. I didn't know. You see, I haven't seen her for years. Years and years, but I heard from someone who said she was here. So sorry, the receptionist said. No worries. I just wanted to thank her for being so kind to me. She died very peacefully, he said, literally in her sleep. And Nora smiled and retreated politely away. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for looking after her. I'll just go now. Bye. The next section is an incident with the police. She stepped back out onto Shakespeare Road with her bag and her chess set, and she didn't really know what to do. There were tingles throughout her body. Not quite pins and needles, more like strange, fuzzy static feeling, that strange, fuzzy static feeling she had felt before when she was nearing the end of a particular existence. Trying to ignore the feeling in her body, she headed in the vague direction of the car park. She passed her old garden flat at 33A Bancroft Avenue. A man she had never seen before was taking a box of recycling out. She thought of the lovely house in Cambridge she now had, and couldn't help but compare it to this shabby flat on a litter-strewn street. The tingle subsided a little. She passed Mr. Banerjee's house, or what had been Mr. Banerjee's house, and saw the only owned house on the street that hadn't been divided into flats, though now it looked very different. The small front lawn was overgrown, and there was no sign of the clematis or busy lizzies in pots that Nora had watered for him last summer when he'd been recovering from his hip surgery. I wonder if busy lizzies are, are strawberry. Because remember yesterday in Hot Tub Boyfriend, it talked about like early Alice's and what else was there? Everlasting. I can't remember which other ones there were, but there were names like that. So I'm curious. Actually, you know what? I'm going to check that really quickly. It's, what is it? Busy Lizzie? That's what it was called? Let me see here. Yeah, Busy Lizzie. Hello? Can you type? Sometimes when I'm streaming, I notice that my computer lags over here. Oh, no, they're not. They're really pretty flowers. Wow. Very pretty. I'll show you real quick. Hold on. See? Pretty flowers. Yeah. Okay. The small front lawn was overgrown, and there were no signs of clematis or busy lizzies in pots that Nora had watered for him last summer when he'd been recovering from his hip surgery. On the pavement, she noticed a couple of crumpled, larger cans. Oh, sorry, lager. Brain does not work right away. On the pavement, she noticed a couple of crumpled lager cans. She saw a woman with a blonde bob and tanned skin walking towards her on the pavement with two small children in a double push car. She looked exhausted. It was the woman she had spoken to in the newsagents the day she had decided to die. The one who had seemed happy and relaxed. Carrie Ann. She hadn't noticed Nora because one child was wailing and she was trying to pacify the distressed, red-cheeked boy by waving a plastic dinosaur in front of him. Me and Jake were like rabbits, but we got there. Two little terrors. But worth it, you know? I just feel complete. I could show you some pictures.
Then Carrie Ann looked up and saw Nora. I know you, don't I? Is it Nora? Yes. Hi, Nora. Hi, Carrie Ann. You remember my name? Oh, wow. I was in awe of you in school. You seem to have it all. Did you ever make it to the Olympics? Yes, actually. Kind of. One me did. But it wasn't what I wanted it to be. But then, what is, right? Wow, that's... Alright, she was really candid about that. Carrie Ann seemed momentarily confused, and then her son threw the dinosaur onto the pavement and it landed next to one of the crumpled cans. Right. Nora picked up the dinosaur, a stegosaurus on close inspection, and handed it to Carrie Ann, who smiled her gratitude and headed into the house that should have belonged to Mr. Banerjee, just as the boy descended into a full tantrum. Bye, said Nora. Yeah, bye. And Nora wondered what the difference had been. What had forced Mr. Banerjee to go into the care home he'd been determined not to go to? She was the only difference between the two Mr. Banerjees, but what was that difference? What had she done? Set up an online shop? Picked up his prescription a few times? Never underestimate the big importance of small things, Mrs. Elm had said. You must always remember that. She stared at her own window. She thought of herself and her root life hovering between life and death in her bedroom, equidistant, as it were. And, for the first time, Nora worried about herself as if she was actually someone else. Not just another version of her, but a different actual person. As though finally, through all the experiences of life she now had, she had become someone who pitied her for herself. Not in self-pity, because she was a different self now. Then someone appeared at her own window. A woman who wasn't her, holding a cat that wasn't Voltaire. This was her hope, anyway, even as she began to feel faint and fuzzy again. She headed into town, walked down the high street. Yes, she was different now. She was stronger. She had untapped things inside her. Things she might never have known about if she'd never sung in an arena or fought off a polar bear or felt so much love and fear and courage. There was a commotion outside Boots. 2 boys were being arrested by police officers as a nearby store detective spoke into a walkie-talkie. She recognized one of the boys and went up to him. Leo? A police officer motioned for her to back away. Who are you? Leo asked. Nora realized she couldn't say, your piano teacher, and she realized how mad it was given the fraught context to say what she was about to say. But still she said it. Do you have music lessons? Leo looked down at the handcuffs as the handcuffs were put on him. I ain't done no music lessons. His voice had lost its bravado. The police officer was frustrated now. Please, miss, leave this to us. He's a good kid, Nora told him. Please don't be too hard on him. Well, this good kid just stole 200 quid's worth from there, and has also just been found to be in possession of a concealed weapon. Weapon? A knife. No. There must be some sort of mix-up. He's not that sort of kid. Hear that? The police officer said to his colleague. Lady here thinks our friend Leo Thompson isn't the kind of kid to get into trouble. The other officer laughed. He's always in and out of bother, this one. Now, please, the first officer said, let us do our jobs here. Of course, said Nora. Of course. Do everything they say, Leo. He looked at her as if she'd been sent to it as a practical joke. A few years ago, his mum Doreen had come into string theory to buy her son a cheap keyboard. She'd been worried about his behavior at school, and he'd expressed an interest in music, and so she wanted to get him piano lessons. Nora explained she had an electric piano and could play, but had no formal teaching training. Doreen had explained she didn't have much money, but they struck a deal, and Nora had enjoyed her Tuesday evenings teaching Leo the difference between major and minor 7th chords, and thought he was a great boy, eager to learn. Doreen had seen Leo was getting caught up in the wrong set, but when he got into music, he started doing well in other things too. And suddenly he wasn't getting into trouble with teachers anymore, and he'd play everything from Chopin through Scott Joplin to Frank Ocean and John Legend and Rex Orange County with the same care and commitment. Something Mrs. Elm had said on an early visit to the Midnight Library came to her. Every life contains millions of decisions.
Some big, some small. But every time one decision is taken over another, the outcomes differ. An irreversible variation occurs, which in turn leads to further variations. In this timeline right now, the one where she had studied a master's at Cambridge and married Ash and had a baby, she hadn't been in string theory on the day 4 years ago when Doreen and Leo came by. In this timeline, Doreen never found a music teacher who was cheap enough, and so Leo never persisted with music for long enough to realize he had a talent. He never sat there side by side with Nora on a Tuesday evening pursuing a passion that he extended at home, producing his own tunes. Nora felt herself weaken. Not just tingles and fuzziness, but something stronger. A sense of plunging into nothingness, accompanied by a brief darkening of her vision. A feeling of another Nora right there in the wings, ready to pick up where this one had left off. Her brain ready to fill in the gaps and have a perfectly legitimate reason to be on a day trip to Bedford, and to fill in every absence as if she were here the whole time. Worried, she knew what it meant. She turned away from Leo and his friend as they were escorted away to the police car, the eyes of the whole Bedford High Street upon them, and she started to quicken her pace towards the car park. This is a good life. This is a good life. This is a good life.
Yeah. Oh, root was more like tree root. But yes. Okay, so the next set here, or section here, is called A New Way of Seeing. And yeah, that's very confusing, Nora. She's very open about this stuff sometimes. Even when it's like, context would help, or just not saying those things. Just keep it inside.
She got closer to the station, passing the garish red and yellow zigzags of La Cantina, like a Mexican migraine, with a waiter inside taking chairs off tables. And String Theory, too, closed, with a handwritten notice on the door. Alas, String Theory is no longer able to trade in these premises. Due to an increase in rent, we simply couldn't afford to go on. Thanks to all our loyal customers. Don't think twice. It's all right. You can go your own way. God only knows what we'll be without you. It was the exact same note she had seen with Dylan. Judging by the date, written in small felt-tip letters from Neil's hand, it was from nearly 3 months ago. She felt sad because String Theory had meant a lot to people. Yet Nora hadn't been working at String Theory when it got into trouble. Well, I suppose I did sell a lot of electric pianos, and some rather nice guitars, too. Growing up, she and Joe had always joked about their hometown the way teenagers do, and used to say that MHP Bedford was the inner prison and the rest of the town was just the outer prison, and any chance you had to escape, you should take it. But the sun was out now as she neared the station, and it seemed that she had been looking at the place wrong all these years. As she passed the statue of prison reformer John Howard in St. Paul's Square, with the trees all around and the river just behind, refracting light, she marveled at it as if she were seeing it for the first time. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. Driving back to Cambridge, cocooned in her expensive Audi, smelling almost nauseatingly of vinyl and plastic and other synthetic materials, weaving through busy traffic, the cars sliding by like forgotten lives, she was deeply wishing she had been able to see Mrs. Elm, the real one, before she had died. It would have been good to have one last game of chess with her before she passed away. And she thought of poor Leo, sat in a small, windowless cell at a Bedford police station waiting for Doreen to come and collect him. This is the best life, she told herself a little desperately now. This is the best life. I'm staying here. This is the life for me. This is the best life. This is the best life. But she knew she didn't have long. This section is The Flowers Have Water. She pulled up at the house and ran inside as Plato padded happily to greet her. Hello? She asked desperately. Ash? Molly? She needed to see them. She knew she didn't have long. She could feel the midnight library waiting for her. "Outside!" said Ash chirpily from the back garden. And so Nora went through to find Molly on her tricycle again, unfazed by her previous accident, while Ash was tending to a flower bed. "How was your trip?" Molly climbed off her tricycle and ran over. "Mommy! I missed you! I'm really good at biking now." "Are you, darling?" She hugged her daughter close and closed her eyes and inhaled the scent of her hair and the dog and fabric conditioner and childhood, and she hoped the wonder of it would just help her keep her there. "I love you, Molly. I want you to know that. Forever and ever. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mummy. Of course. And I love your daddy, too. And everything will be okay because whatever happens, you will always have Daddy and you will have Mummy too. It's just, I might not be here in the exact same way. I'll be here, but..." She realized Molly needed to know nothing else except one truth. "I love you." Molly looked concerned. "You forgot Play-Doh!" "Well, obviously I love Play-Doh. How could I forget Play-Doh? Play-Doh knows I love him. Don't you, Play-Doh? Play-Doh, I love you." Nora tried to compose herself. "Whatever happens, they will be looked after. They will be loved, and they have each other, and they will be happy." Then Ash came over, with his gardening gloves on. "You okay, Nora? You seem a bit pale. Did anything happen?" "Oh, I'll tell you about it later, when Molly's in bed." "Okay." "Oh, there's a shop coming anytime. So keep an ear out for the lorry." "Sure, yeah. And then Molly asked if she could get the watering can out, and Ash explained that as it had been raining a lot recently, it wasn't necessary because the sky had been looking after the flowers. "They'll be okay. They're looked after. The flowers have water." And the words echoed in Nora's mind. They'll be okay. They're looked after. And then Ash said something about going to the cinema tonight and about how the babysitter was all arranged, and Nora had forgotten completely but just smiled and tried really hard to hold on, to stay there. But it was happening. It was happening. She knew it from within every chamber of her being. And there was absolutely nothing she could do to stop it. Yeah. This section is called Nowhere to Land. No! Unmistakably, it had happened. She was back in the midnight library. Mrs. Elm was at the computer. The lights wobbled and shook and flickered overhead in fast, rhythmic blinks. "Nora, stop. Calm down. Be a good girl. I need to sort this out." Dust fell in thin wisps from the ceiling, from cracks fissuring and spreading like spider webs woven at unnatural speed. There was the sound of sudden active destruction, which, in her sad fury, Nora found herself managing to ignore. "You're not Mrs. Elm. Mrs. Elm is dead." "Am I dead?" "We've been through this, but now you mention it, maybe you're about to be." "Why aren't I still there? Why aren't I there? I could sense it was happening, but I didn't want it to. You said that if I found a life I wanted to live in, that I really wanted to live in, then I'd stay there. You said I'd forget about this stupid place. You said I could find the life I wanted. That was the life I wanted. That was the life." Moments ago, she had been in the garden with Ash and Nora and Play-Doh, a garden humming with life and love. And now she was here. "Take me back." "You know it doesn't work like that." "Well, take me to the closest variation. Give me the closest possible thing to that life. Please, Mrs. Elm, it must be possible. There must be a life I want. A life where I went for the coffee with Ash, and where we had Molly and Play-Doh, but I did something slightly different. So it was technically another life, like I chose a different dog collar for Play-Doh, or where I don't know, where I did Pilates instead of yoga, or where I went to a different college at Cambridge, or if it has to be further back where it wasn't coffee on the date but tea, that life. Take me to the life where I did that. Come on, please, help me out. I'd like to try one of those lives, please." The computer started to smoke. The screen went black. The whole monitor fell to pieces. "You don't understand," said Mrs. Elm, defeated as she collapsed back into the office chair. "But that's what happens, isn't it? I pick a regret, something I wish I had done differently. And then you find the book, I open the book, and I live the book. That's how this library works, right? It's not that simple." "Why? Is there a transference problem? You know, like what happened before? Mrs. Elm looked at her sadly. It's more than that. There was always a strong possibility that your old life would end. I told you that, didn't I? You wanted to die, and maybe you would. Yes, but you said I just needed somewhere to go. Somewhere to land. That's what you said. Another life. Those exact words. And all I needed to do was think hard enough and choose the right life, and I know. But it didn't work out like that. The ceiling was falling down now, in pieces, as if the plaster was no more stable than the icing of a wedding cake. Nora noticed something even more distressing. A spark flew from one of the lights and landed on a book, which consequently ignited into a glowing burst of fire. Pretty soon the fire was spreading along the entire shelf, the books burning as rapidly as if they were doused in petrol. A whole stream of hot, raging, roaring amber. Then another spark arced across from towards a different shelf that set that alight too. At about the same time, a large chunk of dusty ceiling landed by Nora's feet. "Under the table!" ordered Mrs. Elm. "Now!" Nora hunched down and followed Mrs. Elm, who was now on all fours, under the table, where she sat on her knees and was forced, like Mrs. Elm, to keep her head down. "Why can't you stop this?" "It's a chain reaction now. Those sparks aren't random. The books are going to be destroyed. And then, just as inevitably, this whole place is going to collapse." "Why? I don't understand. I was there. I had found the life for me. The only life for me. The best one in here." "But that's the problem," said Mrs. Elm, nervously looking out from beneath the wooden legs of the table as more shelves caught on fire and as debris fell all around them. "It still wasn't enough. Look." "At what?" "At your watch. Any moment now." So Nora looked, and at first saw nothing untoward. But then it was happening. The watch was suddenly acting like a watch. The display was starting to move. 0 o'clock. 0 o'clock in 1 second. 0 o'clock in 2 seconds. "What's happening?" Nora asked, realizing that whatever it was probably wasn't good. "Time. That's what's happening. How are we going to leave this place?" 0 o'clock in 9 seconds. 0 o'clock in 10 seconds. "We're not," said Mrs. Elm. "There's no we. I can't leave the library. When the library disappears, so do I. There is a chance that you can get out, though you don't have long. No more than a minute." Nora had just lost one Mrs. Elm. She didn't want to lose this one, too. Mrs. Elm could see her distress. "Listen, I am a part of the library, but this whole library is part of you. Do you understand? You don't exist because of the library. This library exists because of you. Remember what Hugo said? He told you that this is the simplest way your brain translates the strange and multifarious reality of the universe. So this is just your brain translating something significant and dangerous. I gathered that, but one thing is clear. You didn't want that life. It was the perfect life. Did you feel that? All the time?" "Yes. I wanted to. I loved Molly. I might have loved Ash. But I suppose maybe it wasn't my life. I hadn't made it by myself. I had walked into this other version of me. I was carbon copied into the perfect life. But it wasn't me." 0 o'clock in 15 seconds. "I don't want to die," said Nora, her voice suddenly raised but also fragile. She was shaking from her very core. "I don't want to die." Mrs. Elm looked at her with wide eyes shining with a small flame of an idea. "You need to get out of here." "I can't. The library goes on for bloody ever. The moment I walked into it, the entrance disappeared. Then you have to find it again." "How? There are no doors." "Who needs a door when you have a book? The books are all on fire." "There's one that won't be. That's the one you need to find." "The Book of Regrets?" Mrs. Elm almost laughed. "No, that is the last book you need. That will be Ash by now. That will have been the first book to burn. You need to go that way." She pointed to her left, to chaos and fire and falling plaster. "It's the 11th aisle that way. 3rd shelf from the bottom." "The whole place is going to fall down." 0 o'clock in 21 seconds. 0 o'clock in 22 seconds. 0 o'clock in 23 seconds. "Don't you get it, Nora?" "Get what?" "It all makes sense. You came back here this time not because you wanted to die, but because you want to live. This library isn't falling down because it wants to kill you. It's falling down because it is giving you a chance to return. Something decisive has finally happened. You have decided you want to be alive. Now go on. Live. While you still have the chance. But what about you? What's going to happen to you? Don't worry about me, she said. I promise you, I won't feel a thing. And then she said what the real Mrs. Elm had said when she had hugged Nora back at the school library on the day her father had died. Things will get better, Nora. It's going to be all right. Mrs. Elm placed a hand above the desk and hastily rummaged for something. A second later, she was handing Nora an orange plastic fountain pen, the kind Nora had owned at school, the one she had noticed ages ago. You'll need this. Why? This one isn't already written. You have to start this. Nora took the pen. Bye, Mrs. Elm. A second later, a massive chunk of ceiling slammed onto the table. A thick cloud of plaster dust clouded them, choking them. 0 o'clock and 34 seconds. 0 o'clock and 35 seconds. Go! Coughed Mrs. Elm. Live!
And that was where we were set to end today. I will keep going if you want me to keep going. I swear I didn't do it on purpose. I don't, actually read this, where I'm gonna stop. I just kind of count the pages and try to count 30, or, whatever's closest to 30. It just happened to be that. Yeah. I'm sorry, by the way, if you can hear it. There are a lot of, loud kids outside playing, annoying, obnoxious kids on my lawn having fun outside on a sunny day. So, I'm sorry if you guys are hearing that. Yeah, it did just happen to be pain. I have to say, it's a great cliffhanger. So, if I were a really cruel person, I could end it here. But I won't, because I'm not. So, put this down. You know what? Let me take some water, before I continue on, rather. That was really heavy. Yeah, damn kids these days. Uh-huh. Why do they have to have fun so loudly? It's just that my window has terrible insulation. You literally don't hear that, I think, in any room of the house. I can hear people talking in a normal volume outside from my room. And I'm not on the first floor, so... yeah. Terrible insulation. Okay. So, this section is called Don't You Dare Give Up, Nora Seed. Nora walked through the haze of dust and smoke in the direction Mrs. Elm had pointed towards as the ceiling continued to fall. It was hard to breathe and to see, but she had just about managed to keep count of the aisles. Sparks from the lights fell onto her head. The dust stuck in her throat, nearly causing her to vomit. But even in the powdery fog, she could see that most of the books were now ablaze. In fact, none of the shelves of books seemed intact, and the heat felt like a force. Some of the earliest shelves and books to set on fire were now nothing but ash. Just as she reached the 11th aisle, she was hit hard by a chunk of falling debris that floored her. Pressed under rock, she felt the pen slip out of her hand and slide away from her. Her first attempt to free herself was unsuccessful. This is it. I'm going to die whether I want to or not. I'm going to die. The library was a wasteland. 0 o'clock and 41 seconds. 0 o'clock and 42 seconds. It was all over. She was certain of it once more. She was going to die here, as all her possible lives were ravished all around her.
But then she saw it, amid a brief clearing in the books. There, on the 11th aisle that way. Third shelf from the bottom. A gap in the fire that was consuming every other book on the shelf. I don't want to die. She had to try harder. She had to want the life she always thought she didn't. Because just as this library was a part of her, so too were all the other lives. She might not have felt everything she felt in those lives, but she had the capability. She might have missed those particular opportunities that led her to become an Olympic swimmer, or a traveler, or a vineyard owner, or a rock star, or a planet-saving glaciologist, or a Cambridge graduate, or a mother, or the million other things. But she was still, in some way, all those people. They were all her. She could have been all those amazing things, and that wasn't depressing as she had once thought. Not at all. It was inspiring, because now she saw the kinds of things she could do when she put herself to work. And that, actually, the life she had been living had its own logic to it. Her brother was alive. Izzy was alive. And she had helped a young boy stay out of trouble. What sometimes feels like a trap is actually just a trick of the mind. She didn't need a vineyard or a Californian sunset to be happy. She didn't even need a large house and the perfect family. She just needed potential. And she was nothing if not potential. She wondered why she had never seen it before. She heard Mrs. Elm's voice from under the table somewhere far behind her, cutting through the noise. "Don't give up! Don't you dare give up, Nora Seed!" She didn't want to die, and she didn't want to live any other life than the one that was hers, the one that could be a messy struggle. But it was her messy struggle. A beautiful messy struggle. 0 o'clock and 52 seconds. 0 o'clock and 53 seconds. As she writhed and pushed and resisted the weight on top of her, and as the seconds ticked on, she managed, with a great exertion that burned and stifled her lungs, to get back onto her feet. She scrabbled around on the ground and found the fountain pen thickly coated in dust, then ran through the particles of smoke to reach the 11th aisle. And there it was. The only book not burning. Still there, perfectly green. Flinching at the heat, and with a careful index finger she hooked the top of the spine and pulled the book from the shelf. She then did what she always did. She opened the book and tried to find the first page. The only difficulty was that there was no first page. There were no words in the entire book. It was completely blank. Like the other books, this was the book of her future. But unlike the others, in this one that future was unwritten. So this was it. This was her life. Her root life. And it was a blank page. Nora stood there for a moment with her old school pen in hand. It was now nearly 1 minute after midnight. The other books on the shelf had become charcoal, and the hanging light bulb flickered through the dust, vaguely illuminating the fracturing ceiling. A large piece of ceiling was around the light, roughly the shape of France. A large piece of ceiling around the light, roughly the shape of France, was looking ready to fall and crush her. Nora took the lid off the pen and pressed the open book against the charred stack of bookshelves. The ceiling groaned. There wasn't long. She started to write. Nora wanted to live. Once she'd finished the inscription, she waited a moment. Frustratingly, nothing happened, and she remembered what Mrs. Elm had once said. Want is an interesting word. It means lack. So, she crossed that out and tried again. Nora decided to live. Nothing happened. She tried again. Nora was ready to live. Still nothing, even when she underlined the word live. Everywhere now there was breakage and ruination. The ceiling was falling, raising everything, smothering each of the bookshelves into piles of dust. She gaped over and saw the figure of Mrs. Elm out from under the desk where she had been sheltering Nora, standing there without any fear at all, then disappearing completely as the roof caved in almost everywhere, smothering remnants of fire and shelf stacks and all else. Nora, choking, couldn't see anything at all now. But this part of the library was holding out, and she was still there. Any second, everything would be gone. She knew it. So she stopped trying to think about what to write, and, in sheer exasperation, just put down the first thing that came to her, the first thing that she felt inside her like a defiant silent roar that could overpower any external destruction. The one truth she had, a truth she was now proud of and pleased with, a truth
that she had not only come to terms with, but welcomed openly with every fiery molecule of her being. A truth that she scribbled hastily but firmly, pressing deep into the paper with the nib, in capital letters, in the first person, present tense, a truth that was the beginning and the seed of everything possible, a former curse and a present blessing. 3 simple words containing the power and potential of a multiverse. I am alive. And with that, the ground shook like fury, and every last remnant of the Midnight Library dissolved into dust. And I just want to show you that it's like there on the page like that. Maybe we will continue and finish things. The next section is called Awakening. Let's see. At 1 minute and 27 seconds after midnight, Nora Seed marked her emergence back into life by vomiting all over her duvet. Alive, but hardly. Choking, exhausted, dehydrated, struggling, trembling, heavy, delirious, pain in her chest, even more pain in her head. This was the worst life could feel, and yet it was life, and life was precisely what she wanted. It was hard, near impossible to pull herself off the bed, but she knew she had to get vertical. She managed it, somehow, and grabbed her phone, but it seemed too heavy and slippy to keep a grasp of, and it fell onto the floor beyond view. "Help!" she croaked, staggering out of the room. Her hallway seemed to be tilting like it was a ship in a storm, but she reached the door without passing out, then dragged the chain lock off the latch and managed, after great effort, to open it. "Please help me." She barely realized it was still raining as she stepped outside in her vomit-stained pajamas, passing the step where Ash had stood a little over a day before to announce the news of her dead cat. There was no one around, no one that she could see, so she staggered towards Mr. Banerjee's house in a series of dizzy stumbles and lurches, eventually managing to ring the doorbell. A sudden square of light sprung out from the front window. The door opened. He wasn't wearing his glasses and was confused, maybe because of the state of her and the time of night. "I'm so very sorry, Mr. Banerjee. I've done something very stupid. You'd better call an ambulance." "Oh, my lord, what on earth has happened?" "Please." "Yes, I'll call one, right away." 0:00, 3 minutes and 48 seconds. And that is when she allowed herself to collapse, forwards and with considerable velocity, right onto Mr. Banerjee's doormat. The sky grows dark, the black over blue, yet the stars still dare to shine for you. I believe that was like one of the songs that she wrote in in the life where she was a rock star, is it? Or maybe it was Blue Sky, I can't remember. The Other Side of Despair is what this section is called. "Life begins," Sartre once wrote, "on the other side of despair." It wasn't raining anymore. She was inside and sitting in a hospital bed. She had been put on a ward and had eaten and was feeling a lot better. The medical staff were pleased following her physical examination. The tender abdomen was to be expected, apparently. She tried to impress the doctor by telling her a fact Ash had told her about a stomach lining renewing itself every few days. Then a nurse came and sat on her bed with a clipboard and went through reams of questions relating to her state of mind. Nora decided to keep her experience of the Midnight Library to herself because she imagined that it wouldn't go down too well on a psychiatric evaluation form. It was safe to surmise the little-known realities of the multiverse probably weren't yet incorporated within the care plans of the National Health Service. The questions and answers continued for what felt like an hour. They covered medication, her mother's death, Volts, losing her job, money worries, the diagnosis of situational depression. "Have you ever tried anything like this before?" the nurse asked. "Well, in this life." "And how do you feel right now?" "I don't know. A bit strange. But I don't want to die anymore." And the nurse scribbled on the form. Through the window, after the nurse had gone, she watched the trees' gentle movements in the afternoon breeze and distant rush-hour traffic shunt slowly along Bedford Ring Road. It was nothing
but trees and traffic and mediocre architecture, but it was also everything. It was life. A little later, she deleted her suicidal social media posts, and in a moment of sincere sentimentality, she wrote something else instead. She titled it, "A Thing I Have Learned, Written by a Nobody Who Has Been Everybody." And the next chapter or next section is called, "A Thing I Have Learned, Written by a Nobody Who Has Been Everybody." It is easy to mourn the lives we aren't living. Easy to wish we'd developed other talents, said yes to different offers. Easy to wish we'd worked harder, loved better, handled our finances more astutely, been more popular, stayed in the band, gone to Australia, said yes to the coffee, or done more bloody yoga. It takes no effort to miss the friends we didn't make, and the work we didn't do, and the people we didn't marry, and the children we didn't have. It is not difficult to see yourself through the lens of other people, and to wish you were all the different kaleidoscopic versions of you they wanted you to be. It is easy to regret and keep regretting ad infinitum until our time runs out. But it is not the lives we regret not living that are the real problems. It is the regret itself. It's the regret that makes us shrivel and wither and feel like our own and other people's worst enemy. We can't tell if any of those other versions would have been better or worse. Those lives are happening, it is true, but you are happening as well, and that is the happening we have to focus on. Of course, we can't visit every place or meet every person or do every job, yet most of what we feel in any life is still available. We don't have to play every game to know what winning feels like. We don't have to hear every piece of music in the world to understand music. We don't have to have tried every variety of grape from every vineyard to know the pleasure of wine. Love and laughter and fear and pain are universal currencies. We just have to close our eyes and savor the taste of the drink in front of us and listen to the song as it plays. We are as completely and utterly alive as we are in any other life and have access to the same emotional spectrum. We only need to be one person. We only need to feel one existence. We don't have to do everything in order to be everything. Because we are already infinite. While we are alive, we always contain a future of multifarious possibility. So let's be kind to the people in our own existence. Let's occasionally look up from the spot in which we are, because wherever we happen to be standing, the sky above goes on forever. Yesterday I knew I had no future, and that it was impossible for me to accept my life as it is now. And yet today, that same measly life seems full of hope, potential. The impossible, I suppose, happens via living. Will my life be miraculously free from pain, despair, grief, heartbreak, hardship, loneliness, depression? No. But do I want to live? Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The next section is living versus understanding. A few minutes later, her brother came to see her. He'd heard the voicemail she'd sent him and had responded by text at 7 minutes after midnight. "You okay, sis?" Then, when the hospital contacted him, he'd caught the first train from London. He'd bought the latest issue of National Geographic for her while waiting at St. Pancras Station. "You used to love it," he told her as he placed the magazine beside the hospital bed. "I still do." It was good to see him, his thick eyebrows and reluctant smile still intact. He walked in a little awkward, head cowed, hair longer than it had been in the last 2 lives in which he had seen him. "I'm sorry I've been incommunicado recently," he said. It wasn't about what Ravi said it was about. I don't even think about the labyrinths anymore. I was just in a weird place. After Mum died, I was seeing this guy, and we had a very messy breakup, and I just didn't want to have to talk to you or recently to anyone about it. I just wanted a drink. And I was drinking too much. It was a real problem. But I've started getting help for it. I haven't had a drink for weeks. I go to the gym and everything now. I've started a cross-training class. Oh, Joe. Poor you. I'm sorry about the breakup. And everything else. You're all I've got, sis, he said, his voice cracking a little. I know I haven't valued you. I know I wasn't always the best growing up. But I had my own shit going on. Having to be a certain way because of Dad, hiding my sexuality. I know it wasn't easy for you, but it wasn't easy for me either. You were good at everything. School, swimming, music. I couldn't compete. Plus, Dad was Dad, and I had to be this fake version of whatever he thought a man was. He sighed. It's weird. We both probably remember it in different ways. But don't leave me, okay? Leaving the band was one thing, but don't leave existence. I couldn't cope with that. I won't if you won't, she said. Trust me, I'm not going anywhere. She thought of the grief that had floored her when she had heard about Joe's death by overdose in Sao Paulo, and she asked him to hug her, and he obliged, delicately, and she felt the living warmth of him. Thanks for trying to jump in the river for me, she said. What? I always thought you didn't, but you tried. They pulled you back. Thank you. He suddenly knew what she was talking about, and maybe more than a little confused about how she knew this when she had been swimming away from him. Ah, sis, I love you. We were young fools. Joe nipped out for an hour, picked up the keys from her landlord, collected his sister's clothes and phone. She saw that Izzy had texted. Sorry I didn't get back this morning. I wanted a proper discussion. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. The whole works. How are you? I miss you. Oh, and guess what? I'm thinking of coming back to the UK in June. For good. Miss you, my friend. Also, have a ton of humpback whale pics coming your way. Lots of hugs. Sorry, I need to grab the tissue. Hold on. Just a little bit emotional. Nora made a slight noise of involuntary joy at the back of her throat. She texted back. It was interesting, she mused to herself, how life sometimes simply gave you a whole new perspective by waiting around long enough for you to see it. Aww. And, like, I totally get that, too, because I've been, like, I've had times where some things feel like that, and then just, it's really hard to explain, but, like, something happens, then it's like, oh, okay, and then things feel better. But, yeah. She went on the Facebook page of the International Polar Research Institute. There was a photograph of the woman she had shared a cabin with, Ingrid, standing with the field leader, Peter, using a thin measuring drill to gauge the thickness of sea ice, and a link to an article headlined, IPRI Research Confirms Last Decade Warmest on Record for Arctic Region. She shared the link, and posted a comment, keep up the great work, and decided that when she earned some money, she would donate. It was agreed that Nora could go home. Her brother ordered an Uber. As they were pulling out of the car park, Nora saw Ash driving into the hospital. He must have been on a late shift. He had a different car in this life. He didn't see her, despite her smile, and she hoped he was happy. She hoped he only had an easy shift of gallbladders ahead of him. Maybe she would go along and watch him in the Bedford Half Marathon on Sunday. Maybe she would ask him out for a coffee. Maybe. In the back of the car, her brother told her he was looking for some freelance session work. I'm thinking of becoming a sound engineer, he said. Vaguely, anyway. Nora was happy to hear this. Well, I think you should do it. I think you'd like it. I don't know why, I've just got a feeling. Okay. I mean, it may not be as glamorous as being an international rock star, but it might be safer. Maybe even happier. That was a tough sell, and Joe wasn't entirely buying it. But he smiled and nodded to himself. Actually, there's a studio in Hammersmith, and they're looking for sound engineers. It's only 5 minutes from me. I could walk in. Hammersmith? Yes, that's the one. What do you mean? I mean, I just think it sounds good. Hammersmith, sound engineer. It sounds like you'd be happy. He laughed at her. Okay, Nora. Okay. And the gym I was telling you about, it's right next door to the place. Ah, cool. Any nice guys there? Actually, yes, there is one. He's called Ewan. He's a doctor.
He goes to cross-training. Ewan, yes! Who? You should ask him out. Joe laughed, thinking Nora was just being playful. I'm not even 100% sure he's gay. He is. He's gay. He is 100% gay. And 100% into you. Dr. Ewan Langford. Ask him out. You have to. You have to trust me. It will be the best thing you ever do. Her brother laughed as the car pulled up to 33A Bancroft Avenue. He paid on account of Nora still having no money and no wallet. Mr. Banerjee sat at his window reading. Out on the street, Nora saw her brother staring in astonishment down at his phone. What's up, Joe? He could hardly speak. Langford. Sorry? Dr. Ewan Langford. I didn't even know his surname was Langford, but that's him. Nora shrugged. Sibling intuition. Add him. Follow him. DM him. Whatever you have to do. Well, no unsolicited nude pics. But he's the one, I'm telling you. He's the one. Stop it! Let him take things at his own time. You can encourage it, but chill out. Yeah, but how did you know it was him? She took her brother by the arm and knew there was no explanation she could possibly give. Listen to me, Joe. She remembered the anti-philosophy of Mrs. Elm in the Midnight Library. You don't have to understand life. You just have to live it. As her brother headed towards the door of 33A Bancroft Avenue, Nora looked around at all the terraced houses and all the lampposts and trees under the sky, and she felt her lungs inflate at the wonder of being there, witnessing it all as if for the first time. Maybe in one of those houses was another slider, somewhere on their 3rd or 17th or final versions of themselves. She would look out for them. She looked at number 31. Through his window, Mr. Banerjee's face slowly lit up as he saw Nora safe and sound. He smiled and mouthed a thank you, as if simply her act of living was somehow something he should be grateful for. Tomorrow she would find some money and go to the garden center and buy him a plant for his flower bed. Foxgloves, maybe. She was sure he liked foxgloves. No, she called back, blowing him a friendly kiss. Thank you, Mr. Banerjee. Thank you for everything. And he smiled broader, and his eyes were full of kindness and concern, and Nora remembered what it was to care and be cared for. She followed her brother inside her flat to start tidying up, catching a glimpse of the clusters of irises in Mr. Banerjee's garden as she went. Flowers she hadn't appreciated before, but which now mesmerized her with the most exquisite purple she had ever seen. Hey, purple! I was recommended to wear purple today, so that's really funny. As though the flowers weren't just colors, but part of a language, notes in a glorious floral melody as powerful as Chopin, silently communicating the breathtaking majesty of life itself. The Volcano is what this one is titled. It is quite a revelation to discover that the place you wanted to escape to is the exact same place you escaped from, that the prison wasn't the place, but the perspective. And the most peculiar discovery Nora made was that, of all the extremely divergent variations of herself she had experienced, the most radical sense of change happened within the exact same life, the one she began and ended with. This biggest and most profound shift happened not by becoming richer or more successful or more famous or by being amid the glaciers and polar bears of Svalbard. It happened by waking up in the exact same bed, in the exact same grotty, damp apartment with its dilapidated sofa and yucca plant and tiny potted cacti and bookshelves and untried yoga manuals. There was the same electric piano and books. There was the same sad absence of a feline and a lack of job. There was still the same unknowability about her life ahead. And yet everything was different. And it was different because she no longer felt that she was there simply to serve the dreams of other people. She no longer felt like she had to find soul fulfillment as some imaginary perfect daughter or sister or partner or wife or mother or employee or anything other than a human being, orbiting her own purpose and answerable to herself. I want to say something. I know probably not everybody who watches this will be following stuff that's been going on with BTS. But I know recently they decided to take a break and really just try to find themselves. And one of the things that Namjoon really cited was this idea of needing to retain who he was at his core and said that basically, like, for a little while, it kind of felt like the group had become something that it wasn't, and something that he just didn't understand the direction they were going in anymore, and felt kind of lost with it. And I really do feel like this probably helped to hear this, and maybe even inspired him to take a break and just be Kim Namjoon. Weird tangent to go off on. I know, again, that not everybody's going to be here for it, but, yeah, it totally just kind of resonated for that. And it was different because she was alive when she had so nearly been dead, and because that had been her choice. A choice to live, because she had touched the vastness of life, and within that vastness, she'd seen the possibility not only of what she could do, but also feel. There were other scales and other tunes. There was more to her than a flat line of mild to moderate depression, spiced up with occasional flourishes of despair. And that gave her hope, and even the sheer sentimental gratitude of being able to be here, knowing she had the potential to enjoy watching radiant skies and mediocre Ryan Bailey comedies, and be happy listening to music and conversation and the beat of her own heart. And it was different because, above all other things, that heavy and painful book of regrets had been successfully burnt to dust. I'm wondering, like, if this writer actually had something against Ryan Bailey. Because it's funny, but, like, those are some burns with Ryan Bailey. He was, like, not at all, what she thought he was gonna be and stuff, and, like, now it's, like, his comedies are mediocre and stuff. I just wonder. Sorry, and it was the him, right? The writers that he... I don't know if I said she, but whatever. Yeah, totally. You can't run for years and not wear you down, of course. Yeah, absolutely. And also, I feel like if you do things a certain amount of time, and, like, it's so common for everybody, but I also hear in South Korean culture this idea of, like, meeting expectations and stuff. You, at some point, you can kind of be swept up in things and start doing things for other people, as opposed to just because it's fulfilling for yourself. And I feel like that definitely could have happened, especially in a span of such a long time. So. Hi, Nora. It's me, Doreen. Nora was excited to hear from her, as she had been in the middle of neatly writing a notice advertising piano lessons. Oh, Doreen! Can I just apologize about missing the lesson the other day? Well, water under the bridge. Well, I'm not going to go into all the reasons, Nora continued breathlessly, but I will just say that I will never be in the situation again. I promise. In the future, should you want to continue with Leo's piano lessons, I will be where I am meant to be. I won't let you down. Now, I totally understand if you don't want me to be Leo's piano teacher anymore, but I want you to know that Leo is an exceptional talent. He has a feel for the piano. He could end up making a career of it. He could end up at the Royal College of Music, so I would just like to say, if he doesn't continue his lessons with me, I want you to know that I feel he should continue them somewhere. That's all. There was a long pause. Nothing but the fuzzy static of phone breath. Then, Nora, love, it's okay. I don't need a monologue. The truth is we were in town yesterday, the two of us. I was buying him some face wash, and he said, I'm still going to do piano, right? Right there in Boots. Shall we just kick off where we left off next week? Seriously? That's amazing. Yes. Next week, then. And the moment Nora came off the phone and she sat at the piano and played a tune that had never been played before. She liked what she was playing and vowed to remember it and put some words to it. Maybe she could turn it into a proper song and put it out there online. Maybe she would write more songs. Or maybe she would save up and apply for a master's. Or maybe she would do both. Who knew? As she played, she glanced over and saw her magazine, the one Joe had brought her, open at a picture of the Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia. The paradox of volcanoes was that they were symbols of destruction, but also life. Once the lava slows and cools, it solidifies and then breaks down over time to become soil, rich, fertile soil.
She wasn't a black hole, she decided. She was a volcano, and like a volcano, she couldn't run away from herself. She'd have to stay here and tend to that wasteland. She could plant a forest inside herself. How it ends is this next and final chapter, or section. Mrs. Elm looked a lot older than she had done at the Midnight Library. Her formerly gray hair was now white and thin, her face tired and lined as a map, hands spotted with age, but she was as adept at chess as she had been years ago in the Hazeldean School Library. Oakleaf Care Home had its own chessboard, but it had needed a dust-down. "No one plays here," she had told Nora. "I'm so pleased you came to see me. It was such a surprise." "Well, I can come every day if you want, Mrs. Elm." "Louise, please call me Louise. Louise, please call me Louise. And don't you have work to do?" Nora smiled. Even though it had only been 24 hours since she had asked Neil to put up her poster in string theory, she was already inundated with people wanting lessons. "I teach piano lessons, and I help out at the homeless shelter every other Tuesday. But I will always have an hour. And, to be honest, I have no one to play chess with either." A tired smile spread across Mrs. Elm's face. "Well, that would be lovely." She stared out of the little window in her room, and Nora followed her gaze. There was a human and a dog Nora recognized. It was Dylan, walking Sally, the bull mastiff, the nervous one with the cigarette burns who had taken a shine to her. She wondered vaguely if her landlord would allow her to get a dog. He'd allowed a cat, after all, but she'd have to wait until she'd caught up with the rent. "It can be lonely," Mrs. Elm said, "being here, just sitting." I felt... Hold on. Wait, what? Oh, my pages were stuck together. I was like, what? It just ends mid-sentence. I felt like the game was up. Like a lonely king on the board. "You see, I don't know how you remember me, but outside of school I wasn't always the..." She hesitated. "I've let people down. I haven't always been easy. I've done things I regret. I was a bad wife. Not always a good mother, either. People have given up a little on me, and I don't entirely blame them." "Well, you were kind of mean, Mrs. Louise. When I had a hard time at school, you always knew what to say." Mrs. Elm steadied her breath. "Thank you, Nora. And you're not alone on the board now. A pawn has come and joined you." "You were never a pawn." She made her move, a bishop sweeping into a strong position. A slight smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "You're going to win this," Nora observed. Mrs. Elm's eyes sparkled with sudden life. "Well, that's the beauty, isn't it? You just never know how it ends." And Nora smiled as she stared at all the pieces she still had left in play, thinking about her next move. And that's the Midnight Library. Let's talk. What do you guys want to talk about in the book? Not just in the section, but the whole book. Yeah, I mean, that is life. I like that it really, it opened some doors, but it didn't, we don't know if she talks to Ash. I think she will. But I'm so glad that she worked things out with Joe, and then she, is going to be talking to Izzy, that there was never actually anything there in terms of regret, or, not regret, but in terms of, resentment, or anything like that. It was all just kind of perceived in the moment, which, I mean, that stuff is powerful, our perceptions can really shape things for us. They can be really, really, if it's all that you have to go off of, then it really can feel quite heavy. I might, due to the fact that we just finished the book this week, I may end the poll earlier than I originally said I was going to. I was going to let it last until Wednesday, but if we're ending now, I want people to have time to be able to get the new book that will be starting, if they want to. So, yeah, that's just an aside there.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, so much of it was, on the emotional side was, like, relatable. Um, and then hearing about, you know, those positives, the potential and stuff like that. It's stuff that it's easier to tell someone else, I think, than to feel yourself. Unfortunately. I know it as well. We don't know yet. We don't know yet. Probably Hell's Moving Castle, but we don't know yet. But what I was gonna say is that, sorry to fix a plug. Is that sometimes it's hard to really feel those things yourself, even though objectively, you know them. Especially if you deal with something like depression or anxiety. Because, what's like, the truth is you have all the potential in the world. And I've mentioned that, like, if there's life, there's time. Don't feel rushed. But, like, I've totally felt the opposite sometimes, too, I felt like there were closed doors and things like that. Sometimes that can be overwhelming. Sometimes, like, and sometimes, too, like, so much potential can also be overwhelming as well. Yeah, it really does mess with you. It's hard. I need to put on the air conditioner. Not that it has to do with anything else. Anything else that you guys had to mention about the Midnight Library? Yeah. Yeah. I loved it too. Honestly, it's like a new favorite book of mine. Also, I realize that our frame rate is like going crazy here. There's like a big log of trouble, so I'm sorry if the stream hasn't been the most stable today. But yeah, I think I will be looking back on this and taking inspiration from it and stuff. Good. Good. Well, I'm sorry that the frame rate is messed up at all. But I'm glad at least that it hasn't affected the audio so much. I mean, it hasn't affected the audio at all. But, yeah, that's good. And then I know that the video, the one that's recording right now, and when I uploaded it on YouTube, that it won't be the same way, thankfully. Well, any guys? Any guys? No, anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the book. Most likely, I'll put out an announcement, but most likely it will be Howl's Moving Castle for our next book, which will be starting next Sunday. And make sure to buy the book version. And also that it's by Diana Wynne Jones, if that is the one that wins the poll. Most likely, seeming like it's gonna be. Because there is also the Miyazaki animation adaptation, of course. Yeah, so just go ahead and if you want to, like, wait for my notification, but be ready to pick that up. What I figure what we'll do is we'll actually read the other books that got votes in the order of how many votes they got. So far, it seems like the Howl's Moving Castle is winning, but I think it only has one more vote than the Graveyard book, which is obviously second place. So if Howl's Moving Castle wins this one, then the Graveyard book will be the next will be the next book that we read after that. And then I think it was The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which is currently in 3rd place. But again, I'll give you guys updates, and we will see what happens. Thank you for joining. Thank you for reading along with me and listening along. Thank you for the lovely discussion. We will be back next week on Saturday at 5 p.m. with Hot of a Boyfriend Holiday Star, and we will be back on Sunday at 5 p.m. for Quoth the Author with a book, who knows which, right now. We will see, but thank you so much for reading along and listening along and just taking a part in being here. This has been Sky. Bye-bye!